I know what most of you, some of you are thinking, are men even allowed to be members of the League of Women Voters? Yes, men are allowed to be the league, members of the League, and I urge men and women to join the League. It's a well-known, renowned organization that's working hard to preserve representative democracy. The League's mission is to protect and strengthen democracy by urging citizens to be informed voters. The League of Women Voters is nonpartisan and does not advocate for or against any politician, candidate for office, or political party. The League does develop positions on issues that relate to our core mission, such as transparency in government, voter rights, and civic engagement. We work for fair elections by providing objective information to the public. Over the past few months, our League has presented public forums on voting, featuring our Falls Church Electoral Board and Registrar, campaign finance reform, envisioning Falls Church's future, human trafficking, redistricting, and planning for the Route 7 corridor. And this afternoon, we present our last forum of our League year, Civic Creativity Beyond Civic Engagement, Finger Wagging. Now, it's been my experience in conversations about the lamentable state of our politics that at some point you arrive at the consensus that the core problem is that fewer and fewer people are participating in self-government. And if you're my age, you inevitably ask the question, where are the young people? They don't seem to be paying attention at all. But then I met Pete Davis. He is a young people. He has made a study of civic disengagement, and he is actively working to change the trend, to reverse the trend. Ever since he introduced me to Robert Putnam's seminal work, Bowling Alone, The Collapse and Revival of American Community, Pete has been my civics guru. Pete Davis is a civic reformer hailing from Falls Church. He is the co-founder of Our Common Place, a web platform for local community engagement, which is relaunching this summer as a nonprofit. Pete is a former labor and poverty advisor with Ralph Nader's Center for Study of Responsive Law. He is the co-director of StrongReturns.org, an initiative working to make prison reform the millennial generation's issue in the 2016 elections. He is the co-founder of The Progressive Alternative, an effort to restore the integrity and revitalize the popular vision of the Democratic Party. Pete is a proud graduate of George Mason High School, class of 2008, and he will be attending Harvard Law School in the fall. Please join me in welcoming Pete Davis.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for coming today. I really appreciate it. Without further ado, I'm going to start with my favorite Onion article. It's called Somebody Should Do Something About All the Problems by Edith Hare. In it, Edith writes, why isn't anyone doing anything about all the problems? We're living in a time with supercomputers and underwater sea stations and million-dollar laboratories, and still every day when I watch the TV news shows, I see all sorts of problems. Isn't this a democracy? Have we stood still since Rome? No one's doing anything, and it's a dirty, rotten shame. Most of us feel like Edith, that it is a dirty, rotten shame. And over the past decades, we've witnessed our shared public problems grow bigger and bigger, and we sense that we're in a time with too many good solutions out there to tolerate this weakened state of our nation. People on both sides of the aisle feel that something's wrong, and they're screaming, I'm mad as hell, and somebody should do something about all the problems. But it's not working. No matter how loud we voice our discontent, our great public problems still aren't getting solved. And we're all surprised by this because when we've gotten loud before, it's usually worked. When the streets got loud in the 60s, civil rights legislation soon arrived. When the campuses got loud in the 70s, we were able to pull out of the Vietnam War. When parades got loud and proud in the last few decades, marriage soon became inclusive. How come when we scream at the top of our lungs today, somebody should do something about all the problems, it's not having the same effect? Well, here's my guess. Many of the political victories that America won by getting loud in the last half of the 20th century were less public problem solving and more flip switch politics. Get enough people to want to integrate the stores and flip the switch of the Civil Rights Act, and the stores are integrated. Get enough people to want to pull out of Vietnam, flip the switch and pull out of Vietnam. Get enough people or judges who want gay marriage to be legal, flip the switch and have gay marriage legal. Get loud, change a culture, win over the government, flip the switch, and voila, flip switch politics. But look at many of the problems of today. A democracy corrupted by moneyed interests. An economy that is ripping our country in two. A earth that is warming at an unsustainable rate. And look even at the aftershocks of the past successes. A supposedly post-racial nation that still locks up black men at more black men than were enslaved in 1850. A nation that gave peace a chance for a while, but since 1980 has invaded, occupied, or firebombed more than 14 Muslim countries. A nation that is on the brink of legal marriage equality, but still struggles with integrating this new understanding into our culture nationwide. These problems can't be solved with flip switch politics, no. There's no single institution that can decide one day, okay, let's flip the switch and solve this, like you could with passing the Civil Rights Act or pulling out of Vietnam. We want these problems to be solved, but these are complex public problems, and it's going to take complex public problem solving to solve them. Getting loud might be a step towards solving them, making people see that the problem is there. But that's only the first step. Once we've established that, something is amiss. What now? What is to be done? Many of us, like Edith, choose nothing. Nothing is to be done. But I assume many people in this room believe that something should be done. And we dryly refer to the process, the project of doing something as civic engagement, but really we should just call it what it is, doing something about the public problems of our time. And how do we do something these days? Well, many of us in the Get Loud school think the best way to do something is to protest. How about another march? How about another direct action? But as I said, protest is not enough. It's just one key on the piano of democracy and one-note mode of civic engagement. Okay, so what about voting? There are those who say, look at the protesters and say, maybe if these protesters got to the ballot box in November, these problems would be solved. Your vote is your voice, they say, implying that the best way to express ourselves in democracy is to choose between powerful people to solve problems for us, like we choose between Coke and Pepsi. But we learned the hard way over the last few years that if you limit democracy to just electing leaders to shoot the threes for you, no matter how good that leader is, no matter how much you like him, you're going to wind up disappointed because of the system. So voting's not enough. It's just one note on the piano of democracy. So then there's others who say, okay, serving. Why not take all this energy we're wasting in politics and just go out and help? We just need to lend a check or a helping hand to the victims of these public problems. It's the best we can hope for in this day and age. But this, of course, is deeply necessary. We need everyone out there serving. But when you're solving problems downstream, and these problems are fundamental, and these problems are really upstream, serving's just going to keep getting the results of those problems instead of addressing the root cause of them. And so serving's not enough. It's just another key on the piano of democracy. So finally, there's others who say voicing. If we just shared our important opinions more, if we wrote more letters to the editor, then these problems might be solved. And true sharing opinions can point the way towards a solution. But a lot of times, just sharing your opinion about other people's ideas is a lot of somebody should do something about all the problems. So voice is not enough, just one key on the piano of democracy. And don't get me wrong, protest, voting, service, and voice are wonderful. But we are limiting ourselves to just 4 notes. Voicing is usually having opinions about some idea you heard on TV. Serving is working on other people's projects, or like I said, just dealing with the end result of the problems instead of reaching the initial part. And voting, and this is hard for me to say in the League of Women Voters sponsored event, but voting, worst of all, is selecting other people to solve the problems for you. Where are the notes where we come up with our own ideas together and work to implement them? Where are the chords where we produce integrated solutions to public problems using multiple notes at once? Where are the new songs that co-create our shared public future over various civic engagement forms? 4 notes only gets you chopsticks. And many of us think the answer, We wag our finger and say, come play chopsticks with us. Why aren't you playing chopsticks with us? We need to make this louder and louder, and it'll solve the problems. And we're shocked when people don't want to join us. We say there's something wrong with them if they don't like this song. But it wasn't always this way. There was a time when democracy sounded a lot more like Rhapsody in Blue, when all the keys on democracy's piano were played, when some of the great public problems of the time were actually solved. I'd like to take us back to the 80s, the 1880s. Folks in the 1880s, this is what you're going to soon find out why I care about the 1880s. Folks, like these people right here, folks in the 1880s had seen a great war and a post-war era of racial movements. They had waves of immigrants enter their country, and they had these big giant debates in Congress about if we could assimilate those immigrants into being Americans, or if they were just terrorists crossing the border. They had they had new technology that revolutionized their economy. They had sprawling urbanization, debating about these new forms of urbanization. They had a growing gap between the rich and poor. They opened up their isolated markets, and people were telling their kids, hey, you know, we have a national economy now. You better learn a skill to be competitive in the national economy, a big opened up economy. And then they had titans of industry that were wowing with their philanthropy, but they were also wowing with their crazed free market ideology. They had new communication technology that people were telling their youngsters, you know, these kids talking on their telephones, and, you know, are they not learning with these new communication technologies? They had money corrupting their politics and making people wonder if Congress was for them or just for the corporations. And to top it off, they had a string of middling presidents that aren't remembered by history. And to top it off, they had a terrorist attack, the sinking of the USS Maine, that William McKinley and his conniving political advisor, Mark Hanna, used to justify an invasion of Cuba for the Spanish-American War. But we all know that the USS Maine wasn't done by Cuba. And so do you see why this first Gilded Age is important to me? Because it's an echo right now in our second Gilded Age. And folks in the 1880s, they lived in this first Gilded Age, but they didn't say somebody should do something about all the problems. Rather, they got to work, and they got out of the rut, and they turned that Gilded Age into a progressive era. Not progressive like the political ideology of today, but this idea back then of fixing these problems and getting out there in the community and making it work. So, like, take Jane Addams, okay, from Chicago. My mom's hometown. My mom's right there. Let's hear it from my mom. Jane Addams thought that impoverished urban immigrants needed someone in their corner, and middle-class reformers should stop reading about these people and actually get out there and help in those communities. And she didn't write an opinion column. She didn't wait for a candidate to solve the problem for her. She didn't even take to the streets and say, we need to solve this. No, she started the settlement house movement and Hull House in Chicago, where they brought college-educated, usually women, college-educated women, into these neighborhoods to actually provide health care and education and daycare and childcare and arts and community, and help lend a helping hand alongside the communities they were serving. And that founded social work in the settlement house movement. Then you got Chicago publisher W.D. Boyce, another progressive. He decided every American needed to, like he had, have a childhood in the outdoors, and technology was taking people out of the outdoors, and they needed to get out there. And he decided to wait and vote for a candidate that had been for nature, no? He decided to write a letter to the editor that these kids need to get out there and go get in the outdoors. No, he founded the Boy Scouts. And he decided to do it on his own. And here's another story. In Stockbridge, Massachusetts, Mary Gross Hopkins got mad when someone was walking through her town that was visiting her town out there, and said, this village is pretty ugly. And she got into the idea of the physical beauty of villages. And she founded what was called the Laurel Hill Association, to lay sidewalks, plant trees, and establish parks. This eventually started a thing called the Village Improvement Society movement. And right in 1885, so this is the Village Improvement Society movement, a bunch of people in dresses taking care of the public parks. And in 1885, the Village Improvement Society movement made it to Falls Church. And that's what VPIS is today, because someone in the progressive era decided to do something. And same thing happened with another false churcher, E.B. Henderson. He didn't just vote for change. He didn't just voice for change. He didn't just serve in pre-existing things or protest on the streets. He founded the All-Black Amateur Athletic Association, the Colored Citizens Protective League. He founded, there weren't enough referees in sports, so he decided a training center for referees in sports so that when they went out there and protested that there weren't enough black referees in sports, he already had a bunch of trained referees. An alternative is better than is worth 1,000 protests, and that's what he did that. And so might I add, so this is just 4 examples, but just to hit home how civically creative this era was. Robert Putnam in that book, Bowling Alone, he did a study of every mass membership organization in the United States that had over 1 million members. 220-year history of this country. In a 50-year period between 1870 and 1920, half of all membership organizations that had over 1 million people were created. So just to show. And these are really obscure organizations that you've never heard of, such as the American Red Cross, the NAACP, the Knights of Columbus, the Rotary Club, the PTA, the National Rifle Association, the Lions Club, the Veterans of Foreign Wars, throw in the ACLU, the 4-H, the ever-famous Sons of Norway, the Sierra Club, the ABA, the Audubon Society, most college fraternities and sororities, if you look it up, they were probably created between 1870 and 1920 by this civic creative generation. And finally, Carrie Chapman Catt, a member of the Progressive Era generation, not only founded the National Committee on the Cause and Cure for War, the International Women's Suffrage Association, the Process Committee of Non-Jewish Women Against the Persecution of Jews in Germany, what an acronym, the Women's Centennial Congress, but also what she called a mighty political experiment in 1920 aimed at helping newly enfranchised women exercise their responsibilities as voters, the League of Women Voters. Might I also mention, these weren't just organizations. These were new ideas coming out of the cities, coming out of the states, and trickling everywhere, like the secret ballot, the presidential primary, American kindergarten, the direct election of senators, the 8-hour workday, public playgrounds, the national park system, the sewers, the subway services. Margaret Sanger invented sex ed. William James invented psychology. And of course, I say this all without mentioning that they invented Mother's Day. Pretty good. Progressive Era. Pretty good. So how'd they do it? What can we learn from them? They got out of the first Gilded Age by starting a civic creative Progressive Era. How can we get out of the second Gilded Age? The historian Richard L. McCormick said, progressives owed much of their success to a distinctive method of reform, variations of which were adopted by leaders of nearly every cause. So it was a formula, not an ideology, not a great leader that was going to take them out of it. It was a method of reform. Step 1, organize a voluntary organization. They weren't scared of just starting something up. They didn't wait for the lawyers to come in to start it up. They just said, we exist now. We're a voluntary organization. We got a name. They started investigating problems. They had a real culture of, like, let's go out and research this and find out for ourselves. Then they analyzed those findings using social science. So they went out in their communities, found out what was going on, and then they took the kind of big-wig, wonky issues and said, okay, now let's apply that to our issues and see what we've learned on TV or in the radio or in the newspaper and apply it to what we're seeing around us. Then they imagined some solutions, and they weren't scared of testing them. And if they worked, they popularized them, spread them around to other reformers all around the country, and then they institutionalized them, usually like getting the government eventually to do it or some big bureaucratic organization to eventually do it, which is where they ran into some problems, but it mostly worked. And this process is called public problem solving. And I call this process, imagining some solutions, civic creativity. That's the title of this talk, which I define as the imagining and implementing of public projects. And it involves gathering public ideas and working to deploy, generate public ideas and you gather resources to execute on them. And so this seems pretty like, okay, everyone's in favor of civic creativity, everyone likes public projects, but look at how this is a little different than how we do civics a lot of the time. It's spearheading, first it's spearheading instead of just participating. Instead of thinking about civic engagement as just participation in a set of pre-existing institutions, you're a good citizen if you read the newspaper, you're a good citizen if you attend this type of event, you're a good citizen if I see you at the ballot box. They thought of it as rather the process of spearheading new initiatives and helping others spearhead theirs. Instead of wedding citizenship to fixed forms of engagement through which multiple ideas were channeled, They wedded it to fixed challenges and fixed places. And they said every form of engagement of there is part of citizenship. So they also believed in problem solving instead of law. Usually when there's a problem now, we say, oh, someone should change a law about that. We need to talk to legislatures to change a law about that. But they said, they sometimes did that, but other times they started organizations, they formed businesses, they held meetings, they threw events, they found new ways to do credit. They raised money, they got the word out, they found new ways to do religion, to do art, to work that to solve their problems. They used every key on the piano of democracy. At many local meetings in Falls Church that I've been to, they usually start the meeting by announcing all the public officials. In the progressive era, they never would have done that because we love our public officials, we're glad they're serving us, but public unofficials in the progressive era were just as important as public officials. And that leads into the third thing. It was community instead of just the government. And I love the government as much as anyone else. I'm from the side of the aisle that loves the government. But what we have to learn from our forebears is instead of waiting on or asking the state or large institutions to solve problems for them, they just believed we already have a community here, we have people here, and they believed in the supreme assets that they had outside of the government, like each other's time, each other's skills, each other's spaces, each other's relationships. And usually the government followed along. And so Roberto Unger, this philosopher from Brazil, has this idea of 3 ways to think about work. Here's another way to think about what they did. There's instrumental work, which is when you do your work just to make a paycheck. There's honorable work, which is I go to work every day to be an honorable person. You know, I'm a member of my family. I need to bring in money for that. An honorable person pays taxes. An honorable person works. And then there's transformational work, which is you go to work to actually do what you do at work. You believe in it. You think that what you're doing at work is important. And we can think about civics this way as well. There's instrumental civics, which is I go to the meeting because someone's about to do something in my backyard and I need to stop them, or I go to the meeting because I need to lower my taxes or things like that. That's instrumental civics, helping yourself through civic engagement. There's honorable civics, which all of us probably in this room practice, which is I care about our democratic community, so I'm going to participate in the institutions of democratic community because that's the honorable thing to do as a neighbor. But the progressives also believed in transformational civics, which is we actually believe we can move our society in a direction. We can move our community towards somewhere, and we can identify the first steps to start moving in that direction. So instrumental civics needs to be taught to everyone so you can protect yourself. Honorable civics needs to send us past private interest towards public interest, caring about things bigger than ourselves. But we also need to rediscover transformational civics, which is the actual belief that you can change something. That we can say 20 years from now, where are we going to be? Let's see if we can start taking the first steps in that direction. And they were able to do that in the progressive era. They really believed in that part of the preamble in order to form a more perfect union. You could start moving us towards that. And that's what revitalized the nation during this time. I like this picture. This is like my spirit of the progressive era. But the thing is, we slid from a progressive era back to another Gilded Age. What the heck happened? Why aren't we still in the progressive era? Like, why didn't it just keep going? Why didn't we just keep making organizations? Why did it stop in 1920? Well, historians have filled books about this tale, but here's my take. Here's just my humble take on a few of the trends that led to it, but there's a whole literature out there to check out of what the heck happened. Why did this end? Why are we at where we're at now? First is, as Robert Putnam documented in Bowling Alone, the decline and revival of American community, we moved in the last century from community to isolation, and this is something we've all felt in our hearts. You don't need graphs to show this, but there are graphs to show this. Involvement in in-person civic organizations of all sorts, from the mundane, like bowling leagues and birdwatching societies, whoever's in those, I'm sorry to call them, I didn't mean that they're mundane, they can take them very seriously, to the very, societies that are preventing war, societies that are helping get more people to vote. All of these have seen declines across the board, and they've seen it in their membership rolls, they've seen it in surveys, they've seen it in time diaries. Every way you study this, there's been a decline in civic engagement. Participation in religious communities is down over the last century, and some people might think that's a shame. Other people might say, oh, well, that's fine. But the thing is, it's not being replaced by secular equivalents of the community aspects of religion over the last century. Also, informal social interactions, just saying that you like your neighbors more than your coworkers has been down over time. Coworkers recently crossed neighbors, and you like the people that you have to do work with more than just the nice people next door. The amount of people having neighbors over for dinner, playing cards, playing outside is all with other people is all in decline, and this has led to a level of trust that's in decline too. The amount of people who say that people are mostly honest has fallen drastically in the last century. And this is not an environment that makes you excited to start a public project. The second thing is from membership to management. Is what happened. Whenever someone brings up the decline in community engagement, like I just did, I'm sure some of you are thinking it right now, well, you say, hey, wait, whoa, there hasn't been a decline. There are organizations I'm part of that have mailing lists that are growing and growing. Or you say, oh, there's NRA and AARP, they have more and more members as ever. Or there's more and more Facebook likes on this or that page. But as Theta Scotch poll, I'm telling you the book titles just in case you want to read them instead of me badly explaining them. Theta Scotch poll's recent book, Diminished Democracy from Membership to Management in American Civic Life, these memberships are not like the memberships back then. Back in the first half of the century, most people were truly members of their organizations they were a part of. They went to Elks meetings weekly. They made decisions in the chapters of the Rotary Club that trickled upward that could actually change state and national policy. They hopped on trains and rode to biannual NAACP conferences. They were friends with other Eastern Star members in their town, and they went and helped them when they were sick. They put the Order of the Oddfellows symbol on their gravestones. If you go to gravestones, cemeteries where people died around the 1910s, 1920s, you'll see their club symbols on their gravestones. They used the federated nature of the American Legion to citizen lobby for the GI Bill. Not hire lobby, a citizen lobby for it. They held debates for local politicians, and they marched in the streets on election day when their group endorsed a candidate. This is real in-person membership. But soon, the temptation of efficiency, the deal with the devil, got the best of the American people. Why should we meet weekly when we could just have a mailing list? Isn't that more efficient? Why do we have social events when it's not serving our specific mission to watch birds or something, you know? Let's just get to work on what we say we work on, and let's get rid of all the goofy costumes and symbols and parties and ceremonies. And aren't there experts who can lobby for us in Washington better than us? Why should we waste time training all of our members on all of the issues when the professionals with the graduate degrees can handle it? Then the members can send them checks and do it for them. Why should a candidate risk an open forum when instead they can just perform a poll-tested script? It's too risky to let the local people handle a campaign. We should centralize management. Then we'll have money all in one place to pay for the consultants and the polling to find out what they want. And sure, there were benefits of this. You know, proven experts and proven practitioners in the short run do things better. Accountability is unified. Money is centralized and not wasted on failed local efforts. People don't have to take time to help. You can just sit at home, write your check, and be proud of all the results that the managers in the centralized place were able to achieve for you. But the downsides started creeping in because the management became a separate class than the membership. They can be corrupted. They can start caring about their own interests as managers. They can lose touch with what the membership wants. And the membership is far away from the action now, so they can become alienated. Because of the corruption, or even just the illusion of the corruption, conspiracy theories abound. They don't see how a victory is hard because they're not part of the work, so they get sick of sending the checks, and the checks even start going down. So the management starts hiring consultants to advise them on how to get them to keep sending the checks. They start poll testing emails that will play towards their fears and resentments of their membership. Sporadically, and each time they get less and less from the well, and the membership gets burned out. They unsubscribe from the emails. Because membership can't create the only thing that stopped us from being burnt out from public life, which is community. Only membership can do that. This would never have happened if membership was still involved in the work. If they didn't make the deal with the devil for efficiency, the membership would still be in the holistic routine of being part of something, like any other relationship in your life. Paying dues would be a natural part of the body of the organization, just like attending meetings or throwing events or helping out a sick fellow member or going to conventions. It might be less efficient in the short run, but more resilient in the long. If you want civic creativity, again, you got to go from membership to management. And finally, with this, we move from local reality to mass spectacle. When there's no community, when there's no membership, when you're alone, you need something to fill that. So the mass media stepped in to fill the void. If we wanted to know what was happening in the world, we looked at the screen to find out. If we wanted to form an opinion about our neighbors who thought differently than us or who were different than us, we looked at the screen to find out what we should think about them. If you want to find out what projects to work on or what the public problems were of the day, we turn to the screen. We become disassociated from the reality around us. We stop seeing politics as concrete issues around town. How's our environment doing? How's our kids doing? How's our fun doing? How's our water and air doing? And we started seeing it as knowledge of the spectacle. You're into politics if you have opinions about what Mitch McConnell or Nancy Pelosi just did. You're into politics if you know about the recent Hillary news cycle. You're into politics if you know your side's talking point about monetary policy or something like that that doesn't affect you, that it does affect you, but it's not like in your local day-to-day life. And it's in this abstraction. The reason I don't like this abstraction is it's in the abstraction of spectacle where demagogues start their march towards divisiveness and control. It's in the concrete reality of local life, just making local life work, where we are bound together and make progress. If we want an era of civic creativity again, you have to move from mass spectacle back to the local reality. When you're alone, when the managers run the show, when you're getting reality transmitted through spectacle, you can see why we lose our confidence in writing our own songs, in playing all the keys on the piano. What a perfect time to come. And you start seeing government, as Tim O'Reilly once called it, like a vending machine. You know, it's separate from you. It's outside of you. You can bang on the outside about how much the pretzels cost too much. Or you can vote to bring in a new vending machine. Or you can talk to people about how you don't like the pretzels. Or you can give people some of your pretzels, but no matter what you do, democracy is separate from you. It's closed off from you. It's one entity among many, as opposed to an open, fundamental part of life. And this is the narrowing of civic engagement into a few actions from the outside. We just see it, it's just gotten narrower and narrower. If you don't believe me, look at what we're teaching our kids about what civic engagement is. This is the Virginia Standards of Learning for the Responsibility of a Citizen. The student will understand that thoughtful and effective participation in civic life is characterized by obeying the law, serving as a juror. These are both things you just have to do or you go to prison. Participating in political process and performing public service doesn't have any content to it. I would like these to have large meanings. If they mean these in the way I wish they were, that's great, but I don't think they do. Keeping informed about current issues, respecting others' opinions, and practicing, this is a fun one, this isn't civic life, this is practicing personal and fiscal responsibility. I wonder who snuck that one in there. And guess what they recommended as an activity to get kids excited about citizenship? This is a unit recommended by the state of Virginia. Recommends that teachers take students to view and discuss tax forms, followed by asking students to read newspaper editorials and discuss the importance of respecting others' opinions. Where's the part about throwing a press conference, meeting your neighbors, thinking about something new, solving public problems, researches what's going on in the rivers, holding politicians accountable, educating each other, learning from elders? Broadcasting injustice, raising money, filing a Freedom of Information Act request, flying a gyrocopter onto the Capitol grounds to protest money in politics. Where are those? Those aren't in the standards. But that would involve politics being more than a vending machine, something that's all around us, something that's open to all of us. And the Virginian civic educators, reflecting how narrow we see civics, think it's just taxes and voting. And so many of us become civically engaged, disengaged, we drop out, and those of us who remain civically engaged, we wag our fingers and say, politics matters, you better tune in. We wag our fingers with op-eds that say kids don't know the free branches of government anymore, they can't name any of the founders. We wag our fingers at our neighbors for not coming to the recent town hall meeting. We wag our fingers and say, you know, less people voted in the last election than voted in American Idol, or whatever they say these days. But the thing is, no matter if we're right or not about these wagging of the fingers, it's not working. The non-engaged, and especially non-engaged young people, are responding to us like one naturally does when they get a blanket finger wagging, ignoring us. And it's not the kids' fault. The kids are all right. We kids are all right. We all have the same romantic desire to do big things. We want to make a difference. We want to express our creative ideas. We want to have the esteem of our neighbors. But the romantic spirit that's inside of us all, and the public spirit that's inside of us all, it flows where it's welcomed. When the civic sphere starts with negative and critical comments in response to all new ideas, when it cranks new blood through procedure-based committees and risk-averse bureaucracies, when it cares more about titles than missions? How many organizations have you been in that start with doling out titles instead of thinking really hard about your mission and how we can, and what ideas we can do to serve it? The romantic spirit is going to flow somewhere else. It's going to flow to the creative arts. It's going to flow to profit-minded startups. And so you're going to have Steve Jobs being more well-known than Jane Addams. So we need to stop finger-wagging at others for not joining us in our interactions with the vending machine, but rather spend our times opening up civics again. So I'm going to say it here. My name is Peter Davis. I am a recovering civic engagement finger-wagger, and I'm ready to stop and instead think about how we can open up civics to make people feel more part of it. So how do we do this? So I want to end this by giving some really, really practical, maybe it's not really, really practical, just more practical than what I said, relatively practical advice. So some 10 ideas. So forget I said they were practical. The first is anything that's going to involve civics at all and getting people out there, you have to move from isolation to community. Anything that gets neighbors meeting with each other, anything that gets people out of their houses and making friends and making relationships is going to be the bread and butter of what makes civic engagement work. We need to move from management to membership. Stop raising money to send away. Well, if I was giving this talk in Iowa, to send away to Washington, D.C., but we all live in Washington, D.C. So, but like this, start thinking about ways that we can get the membership to management balance going. So if too much of your time is spending serving the managers of your organizations that are far away, or serving ideas that are coming from the top, let's bring it back home and get people actually doing this themselves. Start believing in yourselves again. Start believing you can do your own research about public problems. Start believing you can look around you. And then we need to move from, and speaking of that, we need to move from mass spectacle back to local reality. We got to stop looking towards MSNBC and Fox News, even though I'm sure most people here it's MSNBC, for our answers to things, and start just meeting people around us. I've been going around just talking to formerly incarcerated people throughout the South. And I've discovered so many things I never would have found out on TV. When you just start talking to people and when you just start meeting with people, and that's where you find out your answers to what's going on in reality of you. Reality starts feeling real again. It stops being angering. You start getting excited about all the opportunities. With regard to voting, we're always like, how do we get more people to vote? The thing is, we need to get people to care about projects instead of just candidates. We keep putting up these leaders and saying, this leader will solve everything, get excited about this leader. But the thing is, people are only going to care about elections if they care about their places first, they care about this country, they care about this town, and then they care about projects within those places. If you care about achieving something, if you care about moving in a direction, then you'll care about voting as one of the 100 tools. Stop making voting such a big deal. It's one of the 100 tools you could use, and if you care about projects, you'll use that tool because it is an important tool. With regard to voice, instead of just voicing your opinion, let's stop having up or down opinions and let's start thinking more like an engineer than a lawyer. Like, instead of that's wrong, and this is a guy going to law school, so nothing against lawyers here. I never could cut it as an engineer. Engineers don't say this is good or this is bad. They say, oh, let's see how we can use that. They think about things as problems that can be solved. They think about civic engineering tools. So like an engineer has these engineering tools that work in multiple engineering projects, like a fortified triangle is good in bridges or whatever. Obviously, I'm not a physical engineer. But there's also civic engineering we can do. Like, for example, having food at your events makes more people come. So that's a civic engineering tool, like an engineering triangle. And if we talked like this when people proposed ideas, instead of saying, that's bad, we start saying, well, let's think about some aspects of that. Let's think about how we could use that better. Oh, here's some issues you're going to run into this. And when people put ideas, unless they're like fundamentally against what you believe, start massaging them and they might lead to somewhere you like, even if you don't like them at the start. With regard to serving, we got to pair public work with public problem solving. I asked Principal Bird at the high school, what are we doing about civic education, getting out there in the community? He said, our students have packed 100 bags for homeless people around town, and that's very nice. That's public work. That's putting your hands to causes and important projects. But those kids only learned about packing bags, and I don't think they even learned about the importance of packing bags because they were kind of required to do it. if you change that to public problem solving and say, okay, let's pack bags, but then let's talk about what homelessness is. Let's go out and meet some homeless people. Let's go bring some, I know this sounds crazy, but this is the level of discomfort that you have to make things get better, is let's bring some homeless people into the schools to talk to students and have them ask questions. Let's go help tell their stories. And let's, and then solve the problem. Like, here's another example. There's cleanups of Cherry Hill Park, or, you know, different parks around town. Instead of, have kids go and clean up the parks once, but what about if they did a study of litterers and where the litter was and marked out on a graph where all the litter was, and then they interviewed people about how they design trash cans, and you talk to the public works people about how they pick up all the trash in the trash cans. Think about what you would learn so much more. In protesting, a successful alternative is the best protest. You know, a march, you can keep marching, but what's so exciting is when you have an alternative. When you've created something that says there's a different way. They call it prefiguring a different future. And then you can start pointing to that and saying, isn't this alternative better than it is? And those alternatives always grow. And then finally, 3 more. Education again. Civic creativity needs to be learned like any other subject. We got to have classes in schools. If you want, I always tell the story of the woman, Miss Mahoney, who brought lacrosse to Falls Church. She said, our high school lacrosse team is going to be doing really bad. And it's because there's no elementary school lacrosse team. And you have to learn lacrosse to be able to play lacrosse well. You have to learn civic creativity to be able to play it well as a citizen in life. So we have to have it at all levels of the schools. And we got to build institutions to routinize civic creativity. How many of your organizations have routine, let's have a new idea day where you're forced to have new ideas once a year or twice a year? How much is the City Hall doing where where it can have a day where people come in about one subject? They're doing great things. I've seen a lot of great ones in Falls Church, but we can always do more. And finally, we got to change our mindset that the public has no hands except those of individual human beings. Nothing will just happen. Democracy doesn't just work. It's people who actually do it. And we have to remember that everything around us, from this table to this clicker to the fact that today is a weekend, to the fact that we had roads here, or that we had our first library, or the first Arbor Day was started by VPIS, you know, everything that exists is because someone decided to make it happen. And we need to see that, and we can't believe that this is the perfect world that we have. We got to move beyond that. And maybe we'll move beyond somebody should do something about all these public problems to a new civic creative era. Many people believe that the world is covered in cement. You know, like it's laid by someone else. It's outside of you. You don't know who laid it there. It seems cold. It's dry. It's industrial. It doesn't feel like it has life. And we can feel that a lot of times, like it's just the same thing over and over again. And some of us have decided to live in the cement, change our way of being. Some of us said, one day we'll all get together and we'll form a giant hammer and we'll smash the cement. But I think the way that we got to do it is we got to find the cracks, and we got to plant seeds of civic creations. And we got to return to those seeds and water them and take care of them. And if a last generation planted a seed, keep working on it and plant some more seeds. And then one day we might wake up and the cement's gone and there's a forest. And our kids and our grandkids and our great-grandkids will be walking in it, and they'll be like, I'm very thankful that people in the 2010s decided to plant those seeds and decided to make, to build, to civically create. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Peter. That was great. Peter wants to keep this conversation about civic creativity going. So at this point, we would like to break into 4 groups of approximately equal size and spend about 5 minutes introducing ourselves and picking a recorder who will also be the reporter for your brainstorming ideas. And in a few minutes, Pete will introduce the first topic or theme for the civic creativity brainstorming.
First topic we're going to do, I call these alloys, which is mixing the mission of your civic organization, if you're part of one, with other things as well. So mixing it with socializing, mixing it with fun, mixing it with community, things like that. Any idea you have to take normal civic organizations with standard missions and adding depth to them. A good example of this, of who does this very well, are our friends in evangelical churches. They have a mission, which is to spread their good news, but they mix it by having a band. They have parties. They have things like that, and they have mentoring services. I think Rick Warren at Saddleback Church has a dieting thing for his community. And what can we do with our civic organizations? Many people here are part of them, to add more depth to them, to broaden them, so that more people will feel like they're part of it. She asked what was going on with Commonplace, which is one of the Falls Church local engagement websites that we started. Oh, sorry. Thanks, Allie. And we have been part of this long, it was about a year-long process to decide if we were going to continue being a social venture or to be a nonprofit. And we finally decided last December to go full nonprofit, and I sent an email out to all the users. Let's have the reporters share what y'all discovered.
We talked a lot about making events and meetings accessible as well. So one idea was to have babysitting, especially in Falls Church, to engage more young families. A lot of folks live here because the schools are so great, but having a lot of kids, again, cuts out in time participating in certain organizations. Also having family-based activities. The example of a church was given, so how there's a church service, but there's sometimes Sunday school, so having different activities with a similar aligned mission for different age groups, and using school programs for outreach to adults as well.
Well, one thing, I think we went down a path of what things are detracting from citizen engagement, and that's the issue of parents being overcommitted, raising kids, and the kids being very heavily scheduled, detracts from the amount of time that's available in the community. So you have to figure out a way to blend that so that they are doing those same things, plus are able to build a social commitment to the community.
Civic education, we talked first about looking at school-age people and again, using the League of Women Voters as an organization.
That was a wonderful idea to end on, because I'm really happy we ended on that instead of an opinion, an idea, which was one of my points up there, which was let's start thinking like, what are some things we can do?